Welcome to San Diego Comic-Con 2021 and welcome to the Titan Books panel for the Art of Neil Gaiman and Charles Vess's Stardust, an informal history by Charles Vess, published by Titan Books in September 2021. I'm Andrew Sumner from Titan Entertainment, and I am privileged to be here with the one and only Charles Vess. I think something like 40 years after our last interview.
Yeah.
Yep. Which was in Birmingham, England, if you remember, Charles.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was at Nostalgia and Comics.
Yes.
Which you might not remember, but I remember very clearly. Yeah, right on. And it was about Spider-Man Spirits of the Earth.
All right.
Which I have signed in my book cabinet to this very day.
Well, that's good. I was going to check on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right on. It's right here. And you signed a very nice message. It's very kind of you. And so we're here to talk about this book that we're very, very proud of at Titan, The Art of Neil Gaiman and Charles Vess's Stardust, which you have meticulously been producing in recent times, and we're publishing in September. But before we get into that conversation, Charles, I have a special introduction from our mutual friend and your collaborator, Mr. Neil Gaiman. Take it away, Neil.
Charles Vess is, to my mind, the nearest thing we have on this planet right now to the great Victorian and Edwardian fairy artists who probably reached their peak with Arthur Rackham. The Rackhams, the Kai Nelsons, the Dulux, these people who were illustrators and who evoked all of the glory and the madness of fairy. And Charles is that now. He is one of those people, and we have him, and he is a treasure. I didn't do anything special with Charles except notice how good he was when I was still young enough to have, to be able to say, hey, will you come and draw some Sandman? And then when he did, to say, we'd won an award. We'd won the World Fantasy Award for the only time a comic could ever win the World Fantasy Award for Best Short Story, because they changed the rules the following morning to make sure it never happened again. And I had one of those lovely moments that you don't get very often as a writer, where something happens and you have an entire plot. And in this case, I was at a party after that award. The awards were in the afternoon. And I was out in the desert and I saw a star fall in Tucson. And it was like a huge diamond that seemed to fall very close to us, this meteor coming down. And I thought, what would happen if I went to find that meteor? And I thought, what if it wasn't a lump of rock? What if it was a young lady with a broken leg? What then? And suddenly I had a story. And I went back to the hotel, found Charles in the room that he was drinking champagne at somebody else's party. He'd missed getting the awards because he was off playing table tennis because he knew there was no chance we'd win, and then we did. So he was just celebrating, and I said, Charles, you have to leave the party now. And took him for a walk, and I told him the entire plot of Stardust. And I got to the end and said, will you draw it? And he said, yes. And then we had this idea that we would do it as an illustrated book for a big major mainstream publisher. And we pitched to all of the big major mainstream publishers, who all explained that they were terrified of full color painting and trying to reproduce full color anything. And so we went back to DC Comics and said, would you be okay about publishing something that isn't a comic? It's going to be an illustrated story. And they're like, we're not scared of color, anything. We're DC Comics. That's what we do. And so I wrote it. I wrote it by hand. I remember photocopying the first chapter when I finished it and sending it to Charles, and Charles calling me up and saying, Neil, I can't read your handwriting. So after that, I would, when I'd finish a chapter, I would just call Charles and I'd read it to him over the phone, which was nice because it made everything feel a bit more readable. I would always be writing it with an ear to, I'm going to have to read this to Charles over the phone. And Charles drew everything I asked him to draw, except for one thing. And I wound up having to change one line in my book because I had a badger wearing a heliotrope silk dressing gown. And Charles did not draw that badger wearing a heliotrope silk dressing gown. So I had to take it out from the words. But apart from that, everything I asked him to do, he drew. I think there's something like 400 amazing paintings. And then he keeps drawing beautiful Stardust art because every now and then I'll write about other things and he'll get all excited. He'll do gorgeous art to go with it. And also, of course, when his wife was in Karen was in a potentially terrible car accident. I mean, it was terrible, but it could have been worse. And we needed to raise money for her medical expenses, but also for making his house one that could be navigated in a wheelchair. We put together a book called The Art of Stardust, A Fall of Stardust. And we put together a book called The Fall of Stardust. And we had every artist who we knew had seen and liked Stardust did a picture for us. And I wrote a story for it. And Susanna Clark, long before she was famous for Strange and Novel, wrote the most wonderful little story called, I think, How the Duke of Wellington Found His Horse, and which is just a perfect little piece of Susanna Clark. We're almost 30 years from an anniversary of me taking Charles for that champagne befuddled walk and pitching Stardust to him. And that, because that would have been 1991, Halloween. And we've made something beautiful. And what I love is now, for the first time, people are going to get to see all of that art in a fabulous, fabulous format. And that's exciting. And, you know, Charles, it's not like he's one of our unsung geniuses, because people sing the praises of Charles, but I'm very much hoping that if this stuff is all together in one place, that it will refocus people just on how remarkable an artist Charles Vess is.
Thanks, Neil.
Really, I'm blushing.
He really is. I can see that down the Zoom line. Now, this wonderful book, which, as I said before Neil's intro, we're very proud of. What was the genesis, before we talk about the book, what was the genesis of you and Neil collaborating on Stardust itself?
Well, it started in 1991. We were both attending of the World Fantasy Convention. It was in Tucson, Arizona. And we had already agreed that we weren't going to win this award we were up for Sandman 19. And lo and behold, we did. And then that night I was at a party celebrating, and Neil found me. He had been out in the desert and with some friends further out in the desert where it's really dark. And he'd seen a falling star come down, and it had been such a different experience than one in England where the sky would be hazy, you would barely see it. This was so bright. And he just had this story, and he came and found me at a party, and we opened a bottle of champagne and we walked out in the desert, and he started telling me the beginnings of Stardust. And then it was like, well, would you like to draw that? I'm like, yes, please. And it took years and years from there to actually become a real book and to be sold. But and I talk about a lot of this, the details of this in the book itself. But that's generally it. And it was Neil just sort of dreaming up scenes in this book that he wanted to see me paint.
Yeah, and
it was fun.
Mate, I can believe it. And when you look at the painted results, by the way, there's some beautiful representations of Charles's artwork from Stardust, which you'll be able to see scrolling across the screen.
Okay.
As we talk about it, so it's there for everybody. When did you and Neil first actually meet?
Oh, 2 or 3 years earlier. There used to be this magazine, Amazing Heroes.
Yeah, I remember.
And they came up with the bright idea of doing this swimsuit special in the summer because Sports Illustrated was doing it. It was selling really well. So they were asking all the comic book guys to draw scantily clad women superheroes. And it was doing very well, but they asked me. They made the mistake of asking me. And that was not what I was going to draw. And at the same time, I was illustrating a comic book series called The Warriors 3. And I sort of made a play on this situation in a favorite book by James Branch Cabell.
Yeah.
And said so in the art. And when it was published, the editors said that I was tipping my hat to a famous illustrator from the turn of last century. And the next issue of the magazine had a letter from Mr. Neil Gaiman of England saying, excuse me, but James Branch Cabell is a famous writer, and went into all this. And that's how we started talking on the Isle of San Diego. I don't know what year it would have been, but it was before Neil was quite so much himself. Yeah. And he could walk the aisles and no one would bother him. And we just stood there and started talking about James Branch Cabell, and then off into all these other fantasy writers. And then he asked me if I would like to illustrate an issue of Sandman. And in my mind, I was going, well, no, because up until then, it had all been modern horror, which is not at all what I'm interested in drawing. But when I got back home and read a couple more issues, I went, oh, he can go anywhere he wants with this story. Yeah. So I quickly wrote him. I think I had to phone him because you didn't have emails then. So I said, yes, please, let's do one. So there were faxes and late night phone calls. Of
course, that's the way it got done back then. Yeah. I think the San Diego Comic Con you're talking about was probably 1989. Yeah.
It was, I was sitting at the Forbidden Planet table.
Yeah.
Mike Lake, who was still with all that, had said, well, come and sit at our table. So that's where I was.
Well, just
whenever
wonderful.
That was.
Yeah. Good to see Forbidden Planet at the heart of the action.
Yes.
Even back then.
Absolutely. The beating heart of it all.
Absolutely right. Yeah. The beating heart of comic book commerce. Right there as the deals happen. So so that story, because you famously illustrated Sandman 19, which you was quite justifiably was received rave reviews. Midsummer Night's Dream received many awards. What did that story touch in you particularly, Charles?
Well, I just about 2 years earlier illustrated the actual play, and I really loved it. And that's what set Neil off. He had seen the illustrated version I did, and but he wanted to reinterpret it. And that was so much fun to realize that you could spend your life illustrating Midsummer Night's Dream, just reinterpreting the characters whichever way you wanted. And when Neil said, I'd like Puck to be a psychotic monkey, I was like, what can I do? It was just really fun, and it was exciting enough to where I met my deadline, which is, anyone that knows me knows that's an amazing thing. And I surprised the editors. They were like, this is the finished art? Like, yes. And luckily enough for us, the coloring changed from one hand to the next. And to my mind, a much better colorist, Steve Olive, colored my issue, and I was really happy with it.
Legendary colorist Steve Olive.
Yes.
Yeah. So complimentary for your art in that book as well. Yeah. But I think, as a fan, as somebody who bought that book in real time, it just represented for me such a step change in terms of what Neil could do with Sandman and where he could take it. And your art was just so incredibly rich. Now, do I remember this correctly? Isn't there a crowd scene in that issue that you and Neil appear in?
No, that's
am I mistranslating from another book?
That's in. I put us in several other things, but not there.
Right. Yeah.
Books of Magic, and
that was it.
Stardust,
that was Books of Magic. Yeah, right on. It was absolutely Books of Magic.
Yeah.
Now, how did you come to move from working together on that amazing issue of Sandman? How did Books of Magic come about?
It came about, it went through a number of artists, which really floored me when Neil told me this, because I read the script and it seemed like it was written exactly for me.
Yeah.
But he said he'd gone through 3 or 4 artists, and that when he had mentioned that he would like me to try out for it, do it, they said, well, he's a Marvel superhero artist. Why would you want that? Because I've been doing Spider-Man.
Neil,
being Neil, knew everything else that I'd done. He went, well, you're crazy. He's much more than that. And then it was all smooth sailing after that.
Yeah. I think I think that's a particularly I loved your Sandman collaboration with Neil, and I love both of those. I love both of those books. I thought the Books of Magic was a great concept, and
well, the story for that, I went down to visit. I was in England. I went down to Nutley. I think he lived near Nutley, and we walked through 100 Acre Wood where Pooh happened. And he started telling me the story, and it was just really exciting to think about. Baba Yaga. I could draw Baba Yaga. All the different things in it were really right up my alley of what I wanted to draw. And it just, the more you draw of what is in your heart, the better the artwork is. So I could tell just while I was drawing it that I was doing better than yesterday. So, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah, and I think the pages radiate that sense from yourself. I revisited Books of Magic in advance of us having this chat, and I was really struck by your art, and also with the concept. I mean, I sat there reading it thinking, well, if only the idea of a young bespectacled wizard had legs. Well, sadly, if only that concept could have worked, in a series of novels or on the big screen or something, could have transformed popular culture. But there we go.
But when Neil was telling me the story, and we were referencing, hundreds of years of fantasy novels, and just realized this is someone I can talk with, and I don't have to explain what such and such book is or what such and such concept is. It's just, and I think he was thinking the same thing of going, this is going to be shorthand. We can when you mention a unicorn, then the other person doesn't have to be told it's not a horse with a horn. It's a horse with spindly goat-like legs and a lion tail and various other attributes. So.
Yeah. Now something that I think we might have touched upon it, or I might be referencing having read it on your text, but what was your reaction when you realized that Neil's handwritten manuscript for Stardust was completely unreadable.
Well, I was on an airplane flying to San Diego, and Neil and I were going to have this big meeting. And I just went, and I started circling words. And when it got to be circling an entire page, it was like, this isn't going to work. And, you know, he just met it as a problem to be solved. And he realized, I mean, in the book, we've reproduced some of his pages so you can see it. And some people can read that very easily. And that amazes me. I just look at it and go, it's a really becoming scribble, but it is just a scribble for me. So I was happy when he found a translator. And
am I right in thinking that Neil also at one point was reading chapters to you over the phone?
Yes. Yeah, I have a little CD. It was on cassette discs for cassette tapes for a while, and then I had it translated to a CD. And he read me maybe 3/4 of the book. And apparently, he told me this later, that he'd never read to an adult before, and realized that he could actually be doing spoken word books and it would work. Yeah. And he was really encouraged. He would call me up, and if I laughed or chuckled or whatever at the right spots, then he knew, okay, I'm doing this right. And it was really fun to just go. Every once in a while, he would call up, and he was at that point, he had adopted at the beginning of each conversation, a Russian accent, and he was pretending for it to be James Bond, Mr. Vess.
Yes.
But that was just added fun.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Did you find during those conversations that that spectacular imagery that you're so famous for, was some of that dropping into your mind, or how does your process work? Could you see images as he talked to you, or is it a question of ruminating on it? It came to you in real time.
And unfortunately, by the end of it, it became, he was writing while I was painting.
Yeah.
So by splitting it into 4 books, 4 serialized books.
Yeah.
He was only writing 48 pages at a time. Yeah. So I had no idea what the ending of this book was while I was working on it, which is really not quite the best way to do a book, but it seemed to work out this time. So by the maybe 3rd issue, he was writing the 4th while I was painting the 3rd. And it was, so it just had to sort of grope into the dark. And every once in a while I go, I really wanted to see you. I got this idea of this flying galleon coming into a tree city. So I'm going to write it in the book, and because I want to see you do it. So it made it in a strange collaboration, but it was a collaboration.
Yeah. How wonderful. Before we talk a little bit more about Stardust and the success that Stardust found in the other side of the Stardust story, could you tell the viewers a bit about your journey into art? Did you always know you were going to be an artist? When did that present itself to you?
Well, I rather facetiously say when I could grab a crayon and crawl to the nearest wall. I just always drew. I enjoyed drawing more than anything. And I just sort of blindly decided that's what I was going to do for a living. I know that's not a practical method of making a living, shall we say, but it's just what I was going to do. And I was lucky enough, pig-headed enough, and talented enough to make that work. Yeah. I think you have to have all 3 of those. Sometimes you just have to go, this is what I'm going to do. And when I moved to New York, I was doing laundry in my bathtub, and I ate way too many peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But, you know, I had an idea what I wanted to do. It just sort of seemed to work.
I think that single-minded focus is the thing that you find with just about any artist of any stripe who has become successful. They've gone through a period of time where they put themselves through things a lot of similarly talented people have not been prepared to do. And that's the edge that builds a career like yours. You know, following your dream, no matter what, I think is the key.
Yes, yes, and it's sometimes, you know, my parents were very, very supportive, but I had other people in my life sometimes tell me that you're crazy. You know, when I told people I was gonna, I think I'm gonna write and draw and paint a Spider-Man graphic novel, and they were like, "You're crazy. What makes you think you can do that?" And I am crazy,
Yeah.
but it's okay. It works.
Something that something you did with that, by the way, that I thought was absolutely beautiful, was something you've done since, is your end papers, which I
Yes.
seem to recall from our long ago conversation that part of the DNA of that, the inspirational DNA, was Alfred Bestel and Rupert.
Oh yes, yeah, and all the, you know, the beautiful illustrated books from the turn of last century are the things that I collect.
Yes.
And they do in papers, and they do title pages, and they do all sorts of, treat the book as an art form. And it's something I always wanted to do. And I'd be very disappointed when a particular artist would do, you know, this graphic novel, and it would just be this really blah title page, and go, well, you have, you know, doing something decorative and by hand is sort of inviting people in. And that's what I like to do. And I've carried that over. I've gotten much better at hand lettering, and I do a lot of that for covers that I do nowadays. So, and it makes it more of a piece of art. I mean, I remember, you know, back in the solid comic book days of word bubbles that went over top of things that completely screwed up a composition. They'd be like, what? Why is that there? So it's, I'm obsessed with shapes and forms, and they need to be right.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I was chatting with our mutual friend and your editor, Steve Saffel, the other day.
Yes.
And he was telling me something I didn't know, which is that your early influences were comic book artists, guys like Kirby, Manning, Williamson, Foster.
Right.
And before Phil Trumbo introduced you to Rackham, I was wondering, did you have any awareness of illustrators outside of comics? And if so, who the people were that were on your radar?
Well, that would have been in the 60s.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get online. There weren't any art books. There weren't anything. And but there was this very strange magazine called Castle of Frankenstein that was almost a self-published magazine about horror, you know, science fiction, fantasy stuff. But they also reproduced a lot of artwork in there. And it was the first place I ever saw Hannes Bach or Aubrey Beardsley, George Barr. There were all these people, and like, but you know, there'd be one picture by this Harry Clark, and you're like, oh my God, I have to see more.
Yeah.
Where do you do that?
Yeah.
There's no place to go. It was a very frustrating, and it made the hunt more interesting, looking for things. But by the time I graduated from university, say early 70s, they started putting out a few books, and that sort of cascaded on along. And the really strange thing about collecting art books is the newer they are, the better reproduction is going to be.
Yeah.
The older ones are really crap a lot of times. Yeah. You know, really like, oh no. I remember when the studio book, you know, with all the four guys came out, and the black and white work looked crap in there.
Yeah.
Going, what? I know what all that stuff looks like. Why does it look like this in this book? But there you go. It's all gotten better.
No, that is undoubtedly, you know, there might not be wall-to-wall upsides to technology, but there certainly are some. And reproduction is absolutely one of them, in terms of faithfully representing the intent of the painter.
Which was one of the reasons that I leaped on this idea of this Art of Stardust book when Steve suggested it at a convention a lot of years ago. Because the book, it sort of started getting bleached out. It was never that good a reproduction, and it just seems to be getting fainter and fainter. and I thought of a larger scale book with better reproduction, and then I'd done all this other art that a lot of people haven't seen, and so it was fun to put it in there.
Now, how long did it take you to put the Art of Stardust together? Because it's quite meticulously presented with this beautiful illustration and beautiful reproduction, but it's got so many interesting notes from you as you go through the text.
Well, we'll thank Steve Saffel for being a good cat handler.
Yeah.
He just kept suggesting.
Thanks, Professor Saffel. Good job.
Yes, yes. And it was just, I really wanted to try and drag everything I could out of the corners, the dark corners, and show them off. There was a lot of pieces that not many people had seen that I thought would be way better. And just, he kept encouraging me to talk about it as I was personally experienced it the first time. So, so people could get that feel of how excited I was to do some of that art. It was an amazing project. And there are 175 paintings in the original book. That's more than I've ever done, ever, at any other time. And I just can't imagine someone coming up to me and going, "Would you like to do a book with 175?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if you've got 10 or 12 years of your life. And this, once we started working on it, was just a couple of years, maybe 2 years at the most.
Yeah, wow.
So I was producing a lot of pictures really quickly.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I can't, and I know our viewers are looking at some of the pages here, but I can't tell you, if you're a lover of Stardust and who doesn't love Stardust, what a beautiful production this is and what a great job Charles and Steve have done. Yeah. It's a thing of beauty, actually.
Well, and all the designers, everyone seemed to get into it. And they kept going, well, how about this? Let's do this. Let's, like, sure. Any of this stuff, these beautiful limited edition versions and all those kinds of stuff. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Charles, what place does Stardust hold for you in your body of work?
Well, it changed my life. Both in, when it came along, I was trying to sort of slowly move out of doing comics, although I love comics, and I still have some projects that I'm going to do in comics, but I wanted to do more illustrated books. As you get older, your eyes fade and your energy fades a little bit. You don't really want to do quite as much work. And it allowed me to get out of DC Marvel Dark Horse corner of the universe.
Yeah.
People all over the world were seeing this book.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun. And then the movie happened, and that made it even more so.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you about the movie. What do you think about the movie?
It's fun.
Yeah, I agree.
I had a conversation with Holly Black. I don't know if she's a writer. She wrote Spiderwick and various other things. And our conversation really got down to, if you do a movie of a book you've worked on, all you want is just not to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
Really. And anything other than that is just plus.
Yeah.
And I'm always charmed at Stardust. And, there's things I would do differently. And there are things I wish I designed my pirate ship to look like that one. I think it's great. Wow,
that's a great accolade. I think the thing is, it's I didn't watch the movie for a couple of years because I love the book so much. I was like, oh man, this is just gonna, and I sat down with my daughter and we watched it almost by mistake. It came on Film 4 in the UK, and we got into the first 5 minutes, but I missed the title. I was like, oh wow, this is Stardust. But by that point we were kind of hooked. And I think the thing is, it's got this tremendous fun energy to it. I like the fact that it's got a different energy to the book while it's the same story. And I think that's a really sort of beautifully valid thing, right, mate?
Yeah.
That difference.
It's very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get to see any of the filming? Did you get to go on set?
Yeah.
Now, what was that like?
That's a very long and involved story.
Oh,
which got down to Neil saying, pack your bags, because when they decide to fly you here to see the, because I was already going to be on a San Diego panel talking about the movie.
Yeah.
And his theory was, if I was going to talk about the movie, I should see some of it first.
Yeah.
There's a logic to that in there.
Yeah, of course.
But they were resistant to that. And he said, pack the bags, because when they call you, it's going to be a couple hours, and then you'll be in the airport, and then you'll be in England. That's the way it happened. I had about an hour and a half between getting a call and getting to the airport and flying over to London and going to Pinewood Studios and seeing it. And we spent a couple days on set, and that was really fun. I got to talk to Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, lovely.
I love her work,
yeah.
But she was in her hag outfit,
yeah,
and she never got out of it. I mean, never. She was talking as if she was in the hag, but she had just come off of several years of kind of semi-retirement, and she'd been learning to paint. So we talked about art. That was fun.
That must have been so wonderful, mate.
It was.
That's
which had been the beautiful Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah, of course.
But it's okay.
Yeah. Well, life is tough sometimes, Charles. What can I tell you?
Yes.
Sometimes you just have to grin and bear it, mate.
Yeah.
How wonderful. Did you get to meet any of the other cast?
Claire Danes, I gave her a drawing, got a big hug. Met a lot of them. Not everybody was there. Robert De Niro had already come and gone. I watched, they were in the final scenes in the witch's cottage, and Mark Strong was getting animated by the little doll she had and all that stuff. So that I watched, him fall on the floor a dozen times. Yeah. And they had one of the witches that already been speared to the wall. So they had the dummy up on the wall, and everybody was getting their picture taken next to the witch, kind of thing. And Neil and I would have been in one of the scenes, in the coronation scene at the end, except that he said, why don't we slip up to Skye and get away from it all? I went, sure, let's go.
Yeah.
So we did that. Yeah,
because I remember you spent quite a lot of time in Scotland when you were developing Spirits of the Earth, right? Yeah. I remember this, and
it's a favorite place.
Yeah. Are you still a whiskey lover, Charles?
Oh yes, just a little, a wee tipple here and there.
You are, of course, a man after my own heart. So when the next time we do a panel like this, but we're actually together in person, that's exactly what we'll have on the table.
Okay.
A decent single malt. We'll get it done.
Yes.
And as this panel draws to a close, what has it been like revisiting Stardust for such an intimate project as this art book? What's that process been like for you?
Exhilarating, frustrating, trying to write, I've done a lot of writing in my life, but never nonfiction. So it was really like, how do I talk about some of this stuff? And it was really fun to really get back and go through the whole history in my mind of the book. And it was a pretty magical process of doing the book. Doing this book was work. Work. I think I'd have it all written, and then Steve would go, well, Charles, we really need to find out about this. Like, okay. First you get mad, and then you go, yes, he's right. I need to do that, and you go and do it. So if anybody likes the book, it's all Steve Saffel.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Saffel is a man I admire deeply. However, I'm here to tell you that I think it's mainly Charles Vess. That would be my view.
Okay.
I'm sure Steve's work on the project was impeccable, and I know how he gives his all to every project he works in, and that's why I love him. So, Steve, I hope you're watching this, because you are the man. But you're Charles Vess, the illustrator, mate. And
thank you.
And on that note, what new projects are you working on at the moment, Charles?
Well, I have a book that just came out last week called Honeycomb, that Joanne Harris,
The
wrote
wonderful Joanne Harris.
The Gospel of Loki, and it has maybe 50 pictures in it. It was really fun. Worked on that during the pandemic, and it took a long time to get that book done because she approached me about illustrating it before I started working on Earthsea, and that took a long time.
Yeah.
And I have a novel, a text novel coming out in 2022 from a small press in England called New Calm.
New Calm. The book's called New Calm.
Yeah, the publisher.
Publisher. What's the title of
the book? Is called The Queen of Summer's Twilight.
Oh, lovely.
And it's a contemporary fantasy based on Tamlin, the ballad, set in Inverness, Scotland, and in Ferry.
Wonderful.
And there's motorcycles, and there's goblins, and there's all sorts of stuff. And it was a story that came out of the air and hit me in the head and said, write it. So I did.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, mate, I will look forward to those just as much as I look forward to the Art of Stardust. And I have to ask, because even in the course of publishing this book, we get asked this question: is there any chance that you and Neil will return to the world of Stardust?
There's always a chance. There's a sequel drawing in the book, and he doesn't have much idea of what would be in the sequel, but he did say he saw this image in his mind. He saw an image of Tristan on a hot air balloon descending into hell.
Fantastic. I'm all in for that.
Yeah, me too.
I want to see that, mate. I desperately want to see it. And I feel... Go, carry on.
Oh, if you think about it, then Lucifer, of course, is a fallen star.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then you go, oh, there's all these connections. So
Lucifer Morningstar, of course. Yeah. Right. Well, I'm sure if everybody watching this panel, enjoying this panel, thinks and wishes with all their might, they will bring this about at some point in the future. And I very much look forward to that. So this has been San Diego 2021. This has been the Titan Books panel, all about Charles Vess's The Art of Neil Gaiman and Charles Vess's Stardust, an informal history by Charles Vess, about the spectrally talented Charles Vess's supernaturally wonderful work on Stardust by Neil Gaiman and Charles Vess. Yeah, right on. It's all true, man. It's all true. And I really can't recommend this book highly enough to you. I don't just say that because I work at Titan. I'm telling you it because it is 100% true. You're going to love it. If you're a fan of Stardust, and who isn't a fan of Stardust, this is just an amazing piece of work from Charles. And you should be very proud of it, mate. It's a wonderful read.
I am. It was, reading through the PDF when I finally saw it was just like, wow, pretty cool. Look at this.
Yeah, right. There's no feeling like it being producing something that's just so beautiful, which is what you guys have done. And so take care, everybody. I'm Andrew Sumner, but way more importantly, this is the one, the only Charles Vess. Thanks for joining us today. Take care.
Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.